Thank you, Dr. Twining, and I regret that I was not here on time except for one good thing. We were at a full Foreign Affairs Committee meeting, which is remarkable in terms of bipartisanship. And so I quote one of our friends, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, good news has no feet, bad news has wings. So let me tell you the good news. And indeed, it is bipartisan, and the issues we were discussing largely with the regime in Tehran and the oppression of the people of Iran. And then as I came in, Dr. Twining, I always like to remind you that one of the most memorable times I ever had experienced in my life was to be an IRI, International Republican Institute, election observer in Bulgaria on June 10, 1990, to see the success of American victory in the Cold War, and to see what a vibrant country Bulgaria is today that even Mr. Jaffer wouldn't have imagined. So with that in mind, also I was really pleased to see you're connecting the dots. What we're into is a war we did not choose, of dictators with rule of gun opposing democracies with rule of law. And in that conflict, we have an axis of evil that you've identified, and it'd be Putin, Raisi, Xi, and then who would ever imagine the destitute, poverty-stricken, slavish regime in North Korea providing weapons to Hamas, dictator-owned. And but we can win with peace through strength. Since I was a bit late, I'm going to show another part of bipartisanship that is absolutely remarkable. We're going to ask questions, 5 minutes from each of us, and I'm actually going to defer, can you imagine, to the ranking member, Congressman Cohen, to go first.
Thank you. Exhibit of bipartisanship, I recommended you for speaker before you got here.
and that would be an insult. I can't believe it. It's sending somebody to purgatory. That's just not good.
Dr. Sconser, you wrote the book on Hamas. What I heard about the gentleman who said that Hamas wants this Islamist state, my mind went to like ISIS and the Islamist state that goes all the way to Iraq. And is there an Islamist state that they envision that broad, or is it the land of Israel and the land that's presently under Palestinian control?
It's a good question, and I'll try to unpack it here quickly. If you look at the charter calls for the liberation of Palestine. It's a mashup, basically, of Palestinian nationalism and Islamic fundamentalism, or jihadism, if you will. But when you begin to look at the history of Hamas, as I have, you begin to see that, first of all, it is a splinter faction of the Muslim Brotherhood, which envisions global domination by Islam. And then you begin to look at who has trained and worked alongside Hamas, both in terms of funding and arming the group. And actually there, we look back to the early years in the 1990s, where Hamas was working alongside the likes of al-Qaeda in Sudan. And so you begin to get a sense of the fellow travelers of this organization, and they all have a vision for a different kind of world, one in which the U.S. is no longer calling the shots and where Islam reigns supreme. And so there is that, that element of this organization. Now, don't get me wrong, I think they would be quite content with overrunning Israel and destroying it with the help of Iran, its primary patron. But they'll be looking to some of these other Islamist partners. They are fellow travelers with al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Iran, and others.
Have you seen any influence of Russia in this particular Middle Eastern episode?
I've not seen any direct intervention by Russia. I mentioned before that Hezbollah and Iran have worked alongside Russia in Syria, where there have also been some of these Shia militias that have been threatening to invade Israel. So that is one Russian component of it. The other is, I mean, it was interesting, there was a call between Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu, I want to say it was 2 days ago. It was professional and courteous, but it came right on the heels of a conversation that Putin had with Hamas, where they lauded him for a proposed UN Security Council resolution that condemned Israel for the ongoing violence in the Middle East right now, if you can just imagine that.
Do either you other gentlemen, and thank you, sir, have any knowledge of Russia's involvement in any direct way with the Middle Eastern conflict?
Well, we have seen reports just in the last few days. We saw Ali Baraka, a Hamas spokesman, on Russia Today right after the 10/7 attacks, talking about the fact that Russia was politically supporting Hamas. He noted that they have licenses from Russia to build Kalashnikov rifles and to obtain ammunition. There have been claims by Ukraine that Russia has trained Hamas fighters. We've also seen Vladimir Putin back in 2006 invite Hamas leadership to Moscow and fet them there. And so Russia has never declared Hamas to be a terrorist organization. The U.S. declared them to be a terrorist organization over 20 years ago in 1997. And Russia's draft resolution on the issue, on the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas doesn't mention the terrorist attacks themselves, if you can imagine. It simply talks about Israeli actions. And so it's pretty clear where Russia's loyalties lie in this fight. And while they may have conversations with the prime minister, we know where Vladimir Putin stands, and he sees this as taking a problem off his plate and putting it squarely on the United States. And he blames, actually, the Russia resolution blames the United States, of all things, for what's happening in the Middle East today. Obviously, that's just wrong.
There is one other thing I neglected to mention. There was one isolated report in the Israeli media, and I've not been able to verify it, that Putin has actually issued, I don't know if I would call it a direct threat, but has commented on the deployment of American naval assets and called it a problem in the region that needs to be removed, as the U.S. has deployed the military there to try to help stand behind our Israeli allies.
Let me throw out one other thing and thought, and then it goes to beyond my 5 minutes, I guess. I should stay within my 5 minutes. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Cohen. And I would like now to make my opening statement, and then I, of course, will defer to Congresswoman Sparks, all the way from Indiana. So we're grateful for her service. And then I'll do my 5 minutes, and it'll be strictly enforced. I want to thank everybody for attending this critical hearing today. Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. This hearing takes place after the most horrific terrorist attacks committed against Israel ever. Iranian regime-backed and Russia-supported Hamas has slaughtered, raped, kidnapped over 1,000 people at what has been referred to as Israel's 9/11 in Pearl Harbor. Meanwhile, Putin's forces are committing terrorist attacks across Ukraine, with civilians coming under attack by Putin's forces to commit mass murder, rape, and engage in the kidnapping of Ukrainians, bombing schools and hospitals indiscriminately, just as they had done in Syria. This magnitude of terrorism is only possible in a world on fire where deterrence is broken down with an appearance of appeasement to terrorism. We are in a war that we did not choose, as dictators with rule of gun seek to destroy democracies with rule of law. Hamas and their backers and financiers in Tehran feel empowered. The Iranian regime has gotten away with supplying weapons to Putin and embedding terrorist leaders within parliaments of fragile governments receiving international support. They note the administration's willingness to negotiate with terrorists, providing ransom money. The lessons of history are a reminder that peace comes only through strength, and diplomacy only works where leverage exists. Had the United States and our allies committed to supplying Ukraine with the weapons needed initially, it's likely that courageous Ukrainians would have already succeeded in removing Putin's forces. It's a sad truth, but the world anticipated Ukraine to lose, underestimating the resolve of Ukrainian patriots. Delays have not only prevented Ukraine from saving lives, but demonstrated to dictators that the United States has not responded seriously to attacks on our allies and possibly even to ourselves. Despite Russia's terror attacks against Ukraine and backing from the terrorist state Iran, the United States, surprisingly, still has not recognized Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Russia's funding of the terrorist organization Wagner Group is well known, as are Putin's meetings with Hamas in Moscow in March of last year and just in August of, this year. Hamas visiting with Putin. How clear could this be? And documented connections to Hezbollah in Syria. Its doctrine against Ukraine is one of pure terror. It targets civilians and destroys civilian infrastructure with the express purpose of terror. It is the obvious terror state. Why do we not label it one? Why do we still seek to preserve a status quo in which terrorist dictator states enjoy full integration with rule of law democracies? We did not choose the fight. After the Cold War, every nation was given the opportunity to embrace democracy and enjoy a future of freedom and prosperity. Dozens of countries are free today from communism, with the largest number of countries ever in freedom and democracy due to American military strength. Sadly, a network of terrorist states preferring genocide and barbarism were unhappy with this arrangement. Now, instead of appeasing these states and hoping we must isolate and defeat them, the democracies of the world must close ranks to defeat the dictators. This means primarily prioritizing the three beleaguered democracies who are front lines of freedom and stability: Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. These great societies cling hard to freedom next to neighbors who do everything they can to pry it from their hands. We need to understand that dictators and terrorists of the world are working together, a network consisting of Russia, the Iranian regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Chinese Communist Party, the rule of gun. As the other side, we need to build a network of well-armed, rule of law democracies and reestablish deterrence so that these terrorists will never consider attacking us or interrupt the ability to achieve peace through strength. Gruesomely, the first victims of dictators are the oppressed people of Russia, the oppressed people of Iran, and the oppressed people of China. Both war criminal Putin and the regime in Tehran and its terror groups receive weapons from the hermit regime of Kim Jong-un. Hamas recently used weapons provided by North Korea in their murderous attack on networks, and it must be stopped. And I would refer you, there's an article either on Fox News or on New York Post with specific weapons, the pictures of the weapons, the description of the weapons. They are only made in the dictatorship in Pyongyang. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact identification of these weapons, but it's extraordinary how clear this is. It does not take two rocket scientists to figure out a bizarre-looking anti-tank missile which says made in DPRK, that it's made in DPRK. And frequently, enemies of America actually are very helpful to put it in English. I've seen downed drones from Yemen, and all of them were very helpful because it said made in Iran. With that, I now refer to Congresswoman Spartz.